I want to do something a little bit different, only because I saw this morning, and if I don't talk about it, I'm afraid I'll just forget it. So I feel like I have
Sounds
to
good.
talk about it to remember it. Okay, so this has to do with the Amida. One day we'll go to the Siddur after we've finished with Tanakh. We'll go to the Siddur, but until we get there, the pinnacle of each service is the Amida, the standing meditative prayer, otherwise known as Shmona Esrei. There's a number, the number 18, Shmona Esrei.
That's true.
How many blessings are there in the Amida? You would think there'd be
You would
18.
think
19.
For the last
But there's
2,000 years, for the last 2,000 years, there've been 19.
19.
What do we call it? 8. For 2,000 years. Is there a more stubborn people? I don't
You can't change the name.
know. We're not going to
You
change
can
it.
add a blessing.
That's because
but
it's
you can't-
really 18 and they just added that and they don't want it to be part of the number. Who knows?
That's
But it's just
exactly.
another one of those on the list of funny things with numbers. Anyways, in the weekday Amida, which is 18, or with the additional one, 19. So there's a middle section. Every Amida, doesn't matter if you're davening Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur, or you're davening on a regular Tuesday morning. Every Amida has the same first three, essentially the same first 3 blessings and the same last blessings. It's the stuff in the middle that shifts. So on weekdays, there are 13 blessings in the middle. On Shabbos, there's 1 blessing in the middle. It's a good amount of material, but it's
Yes.
1 blessing in the middle. On Rosh Hashanah, there are 4 blessings in the middle. I think we add 3. I think there's 10 altogether on Rosh Hashanah. I think there's 4 in the middle, and etc. All right, but so when it comes to these middle blessings, this is what struck me today. So we're going to call it blessing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Blessing number 10. Blessing number 10, essentially, there is slight variation when it comes to the words in these blessings. Slight variation. But essentially it goes, Tekah b'shofar gadol. Sound with the big shofar, or the great shofar, l'cheirutenu, for our freedom. So what does it remind you of?
Blowing the shofar
On the Jubilee.
Not for us. What does it remind you of?
Oh, the brains, the word I want.
That's okay. I just want you to sit there feeling ashamed
Okay, I
for,
can do that for forgetting a word, which I do on almost every sentence now. I couldn't think of the word. Oh God, here we go again.
I just want you to sit in a ball of shame for a minute. No, here we are. This is in our Torah portion. And now that I've told you it's our Torah portion, does that help?
Yeah, because that's.
I mean,
right
the
in
one
front
we've
of
been
me.
studying.
Yeah, that's right in front of me.
So we have,
Hey, pipe up over there, Lois. Give me some help.
not only that, but
No, I thought it was the Jubilee, the Yovel.
yes, there you go. She's got it.
Yeah, oh, I said that. I said that. All right.
Wait, I was trying
Well,
to
you're
shame
probably
Liz.
muted.
No, I was trying to shame Liz. So
He's picking on.
I couldn't pay attention to you, Lois, while I was. So we're in.
Oh, so it was for a good purpose. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
I ask for forgiveness, Liz.
Okay.
Because I shouldn't have shamed you. And I'm sure it didn't shame you. Chapter 25, in chapter 25, verse 8. 8.
That number
And it
again.
says there, and it makes perfect sense that it would be verse 8 because it's about the 50th year. But anyways, it goes as follows. V'safarta alcha sheva shabbatot shanim. You shall count 7 sevens of years. Sheva shanim, sheva pamim. 7 years, 7 times. So now you're going to have a grand total of 49 years. And then va'avarta shofar trua b'chodesh hashvi'i. And then in the 7th month of the 7th year, in the 7th cycle, you will blow a shofar be'asor lachodesh on the 10th of the month. B'yom kippurim tabiru shofar b'chol artzachem. On Yom Kippur, the call of the shofar will be in all your land. V'kidashtem et shnat hachamishim shana, and you will sanctify the 50th year. Ukrosan dror ba'aretz, and you will call out dror. Sometimes it's translated as freedom. That is how they translate it on the Liberty Bell. And you shall proclaim freedom throughout the land. Ukrosan dror ba'aretz l'kol yoshveh, to all those who live amongst it. Yovel hi, it will be the Jubilee year, tielachem. V'shavtem ishalach also, and each person will return to their property, v'isha mishpachta tashuvu, and each person will return to their families. Yovel hi shnata chamishim shana tielachem. It will be a Jubilee year. All right. So, and then, and Lois had pointed out when we did this originally that the families that are returning to their house, it's not like your house is returning to you. It's like you're returning to your house.
Mhm.
You've been in exile.
Exactly.
You've been in exile. Now you're going back from exile. So this verse, Tekav shofar gadol lecheritenu, blow the great shofar. That seems to be a reference to something like the Jubilee, but maybe poetically being applied to the actual salvation, to the final
Freedom,
redemption,
to your
right?
freedom.
Maybe, but it has that same kind of language. The son nace the kabes gliosenu, and then raise like a flag or a banner to gather those who are in exile. The kapsenu yachad, gather us together. Mi'arba kanfos haaretz, from the 4 corners of the land. Baruch atah Hashem. We in Nusach Sfard they have kapsenu yachad mehira. They add the word quickly from the 4 corners of the earth. Baruch atah Hashem hakametz nitchem al Yisrael. Blessed are you, God, who gathers the scattered amongst Israel. So that's blessing number 10. Okay.
Okay.
So now, it struck me that right after blessing number 10 comes blessing number 11. Here's blessing number 11. Hashiva shoftenu kevari shona. Return our judges as they originally were. V'yoatzenu kebat chila. And our advisors like they were in the beginning. V'haseri meni yalgon v'anocha. Remove from us sighing and woe. Umloch aleinu atah Hashem levadcha, and be king over us, God alone. B'chesed v'rachamim, with loving kindness and mercy. B'tzadkenu b'mishpat, and find us just in judgment. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, Hashem, Melech, a king, oed tzedakah mishpat, who loved tzedakah mishpat. Okay, so this morning, it struck me that you have shofar blowing, and then you have judgment. You hear it? Because you have the shofar blowing, and then you have the judges. In fact, if you look like in the Art Scroll, it calls it restoration of justice. In the Hebrew part, it just says din. I don't have I wasn't even using the Art Scroll. It just was striking me that you have shofar blowing, and then you have justice. And you know what else is interesting? You have God being referenced as a king, right? The kingship, and he's called Hamelech HaMishpat, the king who judges. That's how.
So now we're making that connection between Rosh Hashanah, that one line one
Yes.
line that says blow the shofar and you're connecting how we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. Is that what?
Especially because during the 10 days, during the 10 days of
Between Rosh Hashanah.
right, Rosh Hashanah Kippur, we changed those words to just Hamelech HaMishpat. Notice how, like, instead of, it's a weird thing to change. If you look at the end of that blessing, it says the God who loves tzedakah, righteousness, and mishpat. And we just shorten it between those 10 days. We just have Hamelech HaMishpat. So you see their attention is on this blessing during these 10 days. And these are our focus on Rosh Hashanah. These are our two main
Yes,
focuses, that God is king, God, Melech, Melech, and Mishpat. And so you have the shofar blowing, and then you have din, you have judgment. Now, there was, as I said before, there are 19 blessings. I'm going to come back to the next one because the next one is the one that was added. Okay,
Right.
I'm going to come back to that one. This is not, I just want to say, what we're doing here is not scholarship. Okay, this is not scholarship. I'm not saying this is their historical intent, but I'm just noticing this here, and it obviously part of why I'm noticing is because it's right before Rosh
Right.
Hashanah, obviously.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a connection here. I am not convinced that they historically meant this. I'm just going to point out something interesting that can happen.
Yeah.
And if you want to take a kind of, let's say, a poetic adventure, and you start with Tekabah Shofar as being Rosh Hashanah,
Right.
and then you go to Hashiva Shoftenu as the judgment about Rosh Hashanah, and then you, just for a minute, you skip this other blessing. We're going to come back to it. Now you go to Ala Tzadikim V'Ala Chasidim. So this next blessing is about the righteous and the Chasidim, etc. And God should have mercy on them and give reward to all those who trust you in truth, and put our place with them. And so we won't be embarrassed because we trust in you. So I am suggesting to you that this is Yom Kippur. I'm going to call this Yom Kippur because that's our focus on Yom Kippur, as being what we call written in the book of the righteous as opposed to the book of the wicked. And also this trust. If you look at the halachic language, even the halachic language, this morning, Rabbi Fox was reading about the halachas of Rosh Hashanah. So it says, for Rosh Hashanah, you should dress in nice clothes. Even though it's a day of judgment, you should dress in nice clothes because we trust that God will give us a good judgment.
Okay.
That's actual language they use, trust, bitachon. So here's the actual language of the blessing. Ala tzadikim ala chasidim. The righteous and the saintly. V'alzikei amcha beis Yisrael, and the elders of your people Israel. Ve'al pleitas sofreihem, and the rest, what is left of their scholars. V'agerei tzedek, and righteous converts, v'aleinu, and us. Yamu rachamecha Hashem Elokeinu. May you have mercy on us, Lord our God. But V'tzein sachar tov, and give us good reward, l'kol habotchim b'shimcha b'emet, to all those who trust in your name in truth. V'sim chalkeinu imahem, put our place amongst them forever. V'lo nevosh, we will not be embarrassed, ki b'cha b'tachnu, because we trust in you. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, mishanu miftach l'tzadikim, you are like, you uphold and you are a source of trust for the righteous. So I am suggesting that there's a kind of poetic connection. You're starting with Rosh Hashanah, the shofar blowing and the judgment, and then you could even say this is about the judgment. But I'm suggesting that, yeah, you could say that this too is about the judgment, that we want to be judged as righteous, and it's all in one. There is a benefit to saying that this is Yom Kippur, but it could be three elements of Rosh Hashanah.
Mhm.
But it also, I like it to be Yom Kippur only because then you have the next one, which is blessing number, so this was 10, 11, 13, and then in blessing 14, V'Yerushalayim ircha barachamim tashuv. So this is about Jerusalem, returning to Jerusalem. V'tishkom b'tocha kasher dibarta, and you will dwell in it as you spoke. Ubnei ota, and you will build it b'karov b'yameinu binyan olam, speedily in our days, an everlasting structure. V'chisei David mehera letocha tachim, and the throne of David will be set up quickly in Jerusalem. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, Bonei Yerushalayim, we got to build Jerusalem. So the only reference we have to let's say when we bench, when we say Birkat Hamazon, and we are referencing Sukkah, so we say Harachaman hu yakim lanu es Sukkas David hanofelas, the merciful one who will restore for us the Sukkah of David which fell. So there is an allusion to Sukkah. There's something called the Sukkah of David. The Sukkah of David appears to be the Beit HaMikdash, or that we're talking about. So this blessing I'm suggesting is Sukkos. So you would have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkos. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkos. And then you have the next one is Mashiach. That's the last. It's almost the last. The last of the ones that we insert are is sort of like a summary. That one is God should listen to our voice and accept with mercy our prayers, and don't return us, without listening to our prayers. But the last one, the next one before that is, we'll call it second to last one, is about Mashiach, as Tzemach David. So the flower or the of David, Avdecha Meher Tatzmiach, should grow quickly. V'karno Tarum Yeshua Secha, and his light should shine. You should raise it up in salvation. Ki Yeshuaska Kibina Kol Hayom. We are looking to your salvation. We hope for your salvation every day. Baruch Hashem. Blessed are you, Hashem Matzmiach Karen Yeshua, who uplift the Karen of Yeshua. So there is a after Sukkos, there is a, I think it's after Sukkos we do this. I know we do it after Pesach, after Shavuos, but I think after Sukkos they call it, I think they call it Sudas Mashiach. Just gonna see for sure that is the one after Sukkos and not after the one on Pesach. Let's just see. A lot in Litvaks call it Nilas Achak, but Hasidim call it Sudas Mashiach, I think. No. No, it's after Pesach. They call it the one after Pesach. Yeah, only Chabad calls it that. The one after Pesach. Amongst other Hasidim, they call it the Suda of the Baal Shem Tov. No, it's the one after Pesach. No, forget it. All right, so what? Somebody does. Somebody. All right, so we'll forget that. But anyways, so right after that, you have Mashiach, which
Should be the
yeah,
last.
there is something connected. There is a Sukkot connection to Mashiach, but there's a connection between everything and Mashiach. Anyways, because you read about Gog and Magog on the Shabbos Chol Hamoed Sukkot. You read one of the Haftorahs is Gog and Magog, and there's something about Shmini Atzeres and knowing when Yeshua is going to happen. All right, anyways, I have to work on that. Why Mashiach comes after that. But anyways, you have the one that immediately struck me was you have the shofar blowing, and then you have the judgment afterwards. And then seeing that thing about the tzaddikim, the chasidim, etc. after that also fits the kind of, especially when we're asking to be written in the book of the righteous as opposed to the book of the wicked, etc. And that we have faith, that word bitachon, that we have faith in the judgment, and also the fact that they mess with the words of that second blessing over there during the 10 days of judgment. It just felt like it was a very Rosh Hashanah-y. And then if you do that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, there's a possibility of seeing Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot there in those middle blessings. So that's just like a cute poetic thing, but it also does help with something. It helps with the following. So that extra blessing that was in between these. So you had blessing number 10 is about the shofar. Blessing number 11 is about judgment. Then blessing number 13 is about the righteous. That would have been 12.
Yeah.
Right? And then
So what is 12?
so 12 is about slanderers. That the slanderers should have no hope. But call Harisha, all that is wicked, Karega Toved, should be destroyed in a moment. But call Oivecha Meheri Karesu, and all your enemies should be quickly wiped out. Ba'azedim Mehera Ta'aker Chaber T'Mager V'Tachniv Mehera Yameinu. And wicked people should be uprooted, broken,
What stays in there?
humbled quickly in our days. God who breaks his enemies and humbles.
That's still
his
the
sinners.
judgment of the bad.
Right. So you could say that their emphasis, what you could say is this. Why did they put this blessing there? Why did they put this blessing there? In this thing. So you could say that originally you would have gone to a blessing about the righteous.
Mm-hmm.
You would have gone right away to a blessing about the righteous and the Hasidim. So you have judgment, then you would have gone to a blessing about the righteous and the Hasidim. That's how it was originally designed, not to focus on the wicked. So the decision was, we're going to focus on the wicked. The wicked, you could say, are like an elephant in the room. Had they not added this blessing, before they added this blessing, if you would have gone right from judgment to about the righteous, and that God should reward the righteous, what you'd say is the wicked are there like an elephant in the room. It's just not talking about them. God is just saying, reward the righteous. We're not focusing on the wicked. We're not asking him to punish them. We're focused on reward the righteous. There's a judgment.
Right.
The righteous are and there's going to be righteous people. Let the righteous people get their righteous judgment. So the wicked would have been like an elephant in the room. You would know they're there, but they're not being talked about.
Right.
And Aviva Zornberg always makes this point, that when you have an elephant in the room, it looms large. It's a strategic decision. When you're not talking about something, it starts to be bigger than perhaps if you had spoken about it. And at some point it needs to be dealt with.
And put in its place so that it's not the big elephant in the room.
Right. So it could be that what happened with the decision about the Lamal Shinim, about this blessing, is it was always sort of there as an elephant in the room. And then they made the decision, we're actually going to reference it directly because we have a need. In their time, they had people that were informing on Jews. Maybe this had to do with early Christianity, or just other people that were informing to the Romans about Jews. And so they felt that they have to address it directly. But it's not like it was never there. It was there, but it was always there as a kind of elephant in the room. Now they're going to address it directly. So they put it there. So first of all, it helps to explain why they're even adding a blessing at all into the Amida. It's and also the choice of location. They're adding it because it was always sort of there as an elephant in the room, but now we feel the need to directly address it, this issue, the issue of the wicked, right? Regularly, we could say, you know what, we're not going to focus on the people that are not doing things right. Let's focus on the people that are doing things right, and get and reward and make sure to reward the people that are doing things right, and everything else will sort of work its way out. Apparently, it wasn't working its way out, and they felt the need to deal with it directly. So now they're dealing.
Are you saying that was because of the historical time
Yes,
that it was? Because of, okay.
it
Alright.
might be early because the word meaning, because sometimes they call it the birkas haminim, the blessing of the meaning. The word min can often mean early Christians. It means a heretic, but it was a term. It's a term that has general meaning, and it is a term that has specific meaning. So the specific meaning of that word heretic in that form, it was understood to be a reference to the early Christians. So maybe it was the early Christians. I don't know. Barrel wine. I heard this decades ago, but Barrel wine, I think, was suggesting that when the Roman government, as Christianity is growing, the Christians are initially oppressed by Jews. They're Jews, right? They're Jewish heretics. That's how Jews are seeing them. So Jews are persecuting them. Eventually, they are going to become the dominant religion in the region because the Romans are going to take it, and then it's going to be it's going to turn on its head. You know, Barrowine was suggesting, as he often does, that we often get the fruits of our own behavior, that we mistreated. Maybe we didn't mistreat them. Maybe they deserved it. I don't know. But we treated the Christians a certain way, the Jews who adopted Christianity, and now we felt the hostility turned on itself. Obviously, this blessing, I mean, according to the Talmud, this blessing is written in the 2nd century. That would have been before the Roman Empire became Christian. Who knows? Somebody's informing. That's typically how it's understood. There were people informing on Jews to the Romans, and that's why they felt the need. But again, of all things, why are you adding a blessing to the Amida? And of all things, why are you putting it there? You could say because this was always there as an elephant in the room, but now you're addressing it specifically, right? But so what does all of that have to do with me? Because everything's about me. No, but I'm saying, so what did it help for me this morning when I'm thinking about all this is that now, if you asked yourself, if you took a poll of Orthodox Jews and asked them, what do you think is the most pernicious sin that we're having trouble eradicating? amongst Orthodox Jews, it would be Lashon Hara. It would be something like Lashon Hara. There's Lashon Hara is not just speaking ill of other people. It comes with a whole package, hating other, unwarranted hatred and all these other kinds of things. They're like in this package. And the Talmud even suggests the second temple is destroyed primarily because of unwarranted hatred. And we still don't have the temple. And when Jews are doing introspection, when Orthodox Jews are doing introspection, there's a whole list that an individual could point to. I could point to the entire list of things you're not supposed to do and say I'm doing those. But if people had to pick one that they would call like the issue of our generation, I think a lot of people would pick. There are a couple that vie for it, but I think a lot of people would pick Lashon Hara. So it works out that you have. I'm just saying, if you do this, you have Rosh Hashanah, which is represented by the shofar blowing and the judgment.
Right.
Then you have Lashon Hara, because Lamal Shani means slanders. So you would have Rosh Hashanah, then you'd have Lashon Hara, then you'd have Yom Kippur. So if you want to know, again, this is more a poetic stream of consciousness. But if you have Rosh Hashanah, and then what are you going to be working on during these 10 days? Lashon Hara.
Yeah, sure.
Because that blessing, that blessing is so difficult. There's so many people that have trouble with that blessing. How do you even hang on to it? What do I do with that blessing? What do I do with it? It's a blessing that God should punish the wicked and get rid of the slanderers. Who am I supposed to think about when I'm trying to have meaning for this blessing? It's one of the most difficult things about the Amidah. That blessing is it's a real problem. If you're really working on how to deal with that blessing. My son Sruli once asked. We were at Kiddush at Chabad, and he asked Rabbi Moskowitz, because we were saying Tehillim because something going on in Israel. I don't know if it was Hezbollah sending missiles or I don't know what it was, but we started saying Tehillim on Shabbos, and the Tehillim was a very violent Tehillim about that God should be, destroy our enemies. So Srili asked Rabbi Moskowitz, aren't we being hypocritical? They're attacking us, and now we're just asking God to do the same thing back to them. Aren't we just as bad as they are? If we think it's bad to attack your enemies, then we're asking God to do it first. Isn't that just as bad? So Rabbi Moskowitz, and then it got onto that blessing of Lamal Shini. And Rabbi Moskowitz, he suggested that he thinks about it, he tends to think about it more poetically, that we're just talking about evil in general, not necessarily particular evil individuals anymore, but just like evil in general,
So
the
many
forces of evil, etc. And but here this sort of helps that I can think about it as Lashon Hara. That in other words, this is my work. So there's the shofar blowing, then there's the judgment, then there's Lashon Hara, which is the work of focus during these 10 days. Then there's Yom Kippur, which is the focus on the judgment for that we should be part of the tzaddikim, on that thing. And then there's Sukkot, which is reflected in the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and Kisei David Hanafalas. That's the actual. Sukkot David Hanafalas. When we read in the benching about Sukkot, we also are supposed to reflect on the Beit HaMikdash and Jerusalem being rebuilt. That's part of the Sukkah celebration, in some ways. There's a lot of messianic. Like there's a Gemara that says, in the times of Mashiach, in the messianic times, God's going to give the world, the Gentiles, a mitzvah to perform, and it's going to be Sukkah, and everyone's going to go in the Sukkah. It's going to be very hot, and they're going to leave and they're going to kick the sukkah. And also there's a reference to the end of days. In the end of days, the righteous are going to sit in a sukkah that's made out of the skin of the Leviathan. There's messianic stuff connected to sukkahs.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then it would be the messianic thing afterwards. Anyway, so that's my thought for so it starts in blessing
It's a
10,
good connection.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So those blessings, it starts with Rosh Hashanah, and then you go to the 10 days of repentance, then you go to Yom Kippur, then you go to Sukkot. Now we have to go backwards. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that. We do have a connection.
Yep.
We have a connection to our parasha because that 10th blessing is borrowing language from Bahar, from the Torah portion of Bahar, from chapter 25 over there.
Yep.
But it does seem to be talking about the redemption at the end of days, but it does borrow from that language. The great shofar for freedom. If somebody would ask,
Well, then you can take freedom as being the end of days.
yes, yeah. But if people are asking, what are you supposed to focus, like on Rosh Hashanah, what are you supposed to think about when you hear the shofar blowing? Because it calls it, as we saw, when we saw the shofar being discussed in the Torah portion of Emor, it said it referred to the remembrance of the shofar, zichron, trua, remembering the shofar blowing. So the question is, what shofar blowing were they talking about? What are you supposed to remember? What are you supposed to be thinking about? Like when you hear the shofar blowing, so there's all sorts of options given that you're supposed to be thinking about the sound of a mother crying.
Well, what about the shofar that at Sinai?
Right? You're supposed to
Yeah.
think of, might be the first one that you go to if you're just thinking about shofars.
Yeah.
And if you're and there's some people who say we're supposed to be thinking about the Akedah because of the ram that was caught in the thicket. So there are some who suggest that we're supposed to go back to the when God blew the breath into the nostrils of man and made him a living being. So there are some who suggest that in some ways man was the shofar, that God is blowing, it's like a flute, that God is playing man like a flute. In fact, the Onkelos, the Aramaic translation over there says, God blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and he became, it says a living being. He says a speaking being. That's how he translates it. He becomes a speaking being. So God blows into his nostrils and out comes speech. So that's like that image of man being the first shofar, as it were. So it reflects on the creation of man, because Rosh Hashanah works out to be the day man is created, or at least, possibly. There's also the idea of kingship, that the sound is heralding the king, like a sound that would herald the presence of a king, because you have God's kingship at that time. So there's all these different elements, that all these things that we're called to think about during that time. Each one has its own value, but there's another one, which is the freedom, which is identified later. It's not in order. That doesn't necessarily mean, as you see, like if you're looking for Tanakh references to the shofar blowing, or let's say the 5 books references to shofar blowing. So you have the sound of the shofar on Sinai, but you also have the reference to the blowing of shofar in Yovel, and there it's calling freedom. and a kind of return, because it says calling out freedom for the purpose. What is the expression of freedom? The ingathering of the exiles. Makabetz Nidchei Israel. So this
bringing everybody back together.
right, which is tshuva, which is also the notion of tshuva, return.
Yeah.
Which you have that notion of return. But here it's the sound of freedom. Let you proclaim freedom.
Yeah.
Amongst the land. But again, as even Lois was saying over there, that the freedom was, you had the freedom to sort of return to the way things were. Slaves are freed, Jewish slaves are freed back into their original non-slave state. Property is, people are returned to their property. You could say people are returned to their standing, their financial standing as well, because when they fall on hard times, they, in a certain sense, they become sort of enslaved because they have to borrow money. And the Talmud says, Eved lova leish malva, that a person who borrows is a slave to the person that they borrowed from. So you could say it's a kind of indenturedness when you owe money, and the fact that the loans are freed at that time. So it's a kind of freedom, you could say.
Yeah, it's like interesting. So many times throughout the Torah and mitzvahs, it'll say, because I am the God who took you out of the land of Egypt. And yet, when we proclaim freedom, it should say that, because I took you, because I freed you. But
Right.
I don't think it says it there. I don't know what connection I'm trying to make there, but
Right, that's it, let's see.
It's an info. Non-connection.
1 second. Yeah, that's funny. You're right. It doesn't emphasize, does it? It does start off by saying, and God spoke to Moshe at Sinai, saying, so there's a connection to Sinai. There's a connection to Sinai.
but that
And
isn't,
when it comes to Shemitah, it does call it a Shemitah of the land for God. So Shemitah, it says for God, for God.
yeah.
Um,
David
you
wants
do-
to know, he
Yeah.
really want, is a Prose Bowl effective in a Yovel year? What does that mean, David?
Yeah.
He said, please ask.
I don't know if we had Yovel anymore at that time. I think there was a question if they had Yovel. I don't think they had Yovel in the second, at the end, and for sure at the end of the second temple, they weren't doing Yovel anymore. I don't know. I don't know if they even had Yovel at the beginning. There is a discussion about it in the Gemara and Gittin.
What about a Shemitah? Is that what you mean?
No,
No,
Shemitah
just,
we-
Yovel.
because Shemitah, you have a close bowl.
Oh,
So
okay.
we may not have had Yovel because there are certain requirements in order to have Yovel that may not have been there at that time, because there weren't a majority of Jews in the land of Israel at the time during the second temple. There were not. Also, the tribes were not in their place. There might have been certain requirements for the Jubilee that were not yet there. So they may not have had Yovel at the time for the decree. Also, I just in general wonder, if you're somebody who's trying to do things as God would want you to do, should you do a Prose Bowl? Or should you just forgive all your loans? I know, a lot of, right now now people are encouraging everybody to do a Prus Bowl. But the question is, let's say you're trying to do things properly as God would want you to do it. Prus Bowl is available to you, but obviously what God wanted you to do originally was to amnesty the loan. So should you amnesty the loan? And is that the best case scenario or not? That's just a general thing. But now that was Shemitah. If you look at Yovel, that's really interesting. In Yovel, God does not emphasize, he just annual count. When it comes to the Yovel, he doesn't say it's a jubilee for God. And he doesn't mention because I took you out of Egypt. Even though it's so obviously connected. But a person will return to his land. You shall not. It does say, you shall be in awe of God. It does say you should be in awe of God, but it doesn't bring up Egypt.
Doesn't bring the what?
Egypt.
Isn't that fascinating? That is fascinating. That's fascinating. That's such a connection. It's such an obvious connection. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking about when I read Tekava Shofar for the next while. And it is connected to her. We had to find some connection to her.
Of course it is.
Yeah. And even here, Tekava Shofar Gadol is saying, blow it for our freedom. In gathering of the exiles is the very next thing. In order to ingather the exiles. So you have the freedom, but it's about returning. Freedom.
Yeah.
You have to have freedom to return. That's powerful. You have to have freedom to return.
Yeah.
A free person to return.
You should
Okay.
see if I might.
Viva v'chasima tova.
Yeah. we can let it-
Yeah. Go.
A sweet year, a good kabenched yor.
For sure.
And
So we do.
thank you.
And all the boys and all the children.
Thank you. Next Thursday, we're good.
Yeah.
Thursday's a good day to have a class.
Yes.
during this period of time.
And a wonderful new year to you, Rabbi, to your whole mishpacha, and
Thank you.
thank you for all of the joy that you brought to us this past year. And thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. All righty.
All right. Thank you. And
Bye-bye.
good Shabbos. And good Shabbos. Yes.
Yes.
I have a question for you.